Okay, cool. Okay, so this is the Sausage Sports Club weekly update. I do this every week to talk about the game and go over what I did this past week. I like to do this for three reasons. One, I think it's useful for new students or like game developers who don't make indie games to like see what it's like to make a commercial game. I also the obvious reason is like marketing. If I don't talk about the game, no one's going to know about it. So this is a way for people who don't know much to come in and like get a lot of information right away. And the third reason is kind of selfish for me to look back on in 5-10 years, whatever, so I can see like when did I learn this specific design thing that I do, or what good thing that I do back then that I don't do now. So it's like it's giving myself nostalgia for the future, basically. Anyway, this week I'm going to try something a little bit different where I try to like run through quickly the things I did instead of like diving into each thing a lot, and then kind of talk about a couple general lessons that kind of came up this week. So first of all, I'll just go over the stuff I did this week. I did a lot of bug fixing. As you might know if you've watched previous streams, I've been kind of like getting close to like Nintendo cert Lotcheck stuff, where I'm like trying to submit a build that will be the one that ships. And there's no release date planned yet. I'm just trying to like get through that system so that I can know that the game's done, and then after that I'll announce a release date or whatever. But I've been doing a bunch of bug fixing for that. A lot of that has been like menu transitions and like mostly UI, honestly, just because that's like the source of a lot of bugs, and that's where like all the scene transitions happen. And last week I added a new loading screen that doesn't like immediately pop in and pop out. There's like a transition, so you have to like wait on ins and outs. I realized I didn't tweet that this is starting, so I'm going to do that real quick. I'm gonna tweet a picture with it. Yeah, that one's cool. Okay, yeah, so a lot of bug fixing, a lot of UI stuff. I started getting distracted this week, not by like doing other stuff besides the game necessarily, but like not working on the things I should be working on, just like adding a little polish or like doing things that were satisfying to work on instead of like stuff I should be doing. And that kind of stuff is like adding these different sports balls, like a basketball and baseball. Just like a new rickety bridge in the jungle that I've wanted to do forever, but I finally got around to doing it. There's in the new Hollywood section, I added this catapult and spent like most of a day on it. And there's like a target game that you can do in the castle area now. But this is all like stuff that I shouldn't be doing yet because the parts of the game aren't done yet, and it's just like not really optimal. Okay, where's my list? Okay, so that stuff. And I did submit to Lotcheck this week, so I'm kind of waiting to like hear back if there are any issues. I'm kind of expecting issues, and then my next submission will be more complete, more, any bugs they report will be fixed. And the submission is kind of like not what I actually plan to have on your Switch on day one. It's like one before that. I know that I want to do a day one patch at least after this build I sent them. And I wouldn't be willing to release without that day one patch, basically. So that's kind of the gist of stuff I did this week. I also like rewrote how ball physics work, and I'll get to that. So I'm talking about things I learned. I added a bunch of little polish stuff, like adding like sounds that happen when your face hits stuff. learn some more stuff about optimization. I'll show this cactus just because it's another thing that I shouldn't have worked on, but is funny. Do dev, okay. And then I'll get into like the lessons I learned. I want to try to keep these shorter than they've been in the past, because sometimes they get like up over an hour, and if I upload it to YouTube, no one's gonna want to watch like an hour plus long video. You're not gonna. Oh, there we go. That was weird. Let me make sure my audio is coming out of my headphones. Disable, okay. So for the desert biome of the overworld, there's these cactuses, and I previously would like jump on the cactus and like hit them and just be kind of disappointed that they didn't feel lifeless. So I went back to the model and, you know, made it floppy. And this is, it's just the same, like, feels like it's on a different layer because I can't jump on top of it. It's just the same kind of tech that the characters use, where there's just a bunch of colliders, and then there's like joints in there. I don't want to get too caught up in this, but it's like fixed joints connected, and then the more joints in the chain, like the ones later in the chain, take longer to take more frames to resolve. Anyway, that was a fun, distracting thing that I'm not really, the game's not really in a place where I should be working on that kind of thing yet, but I dig anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about stuff I want to talk about that are kind of ideas rather than like actual things that I worked on or whatever. So staying focused has kind of been a topic that's come up, especially in the last like 3 months of dev, where especially before I went full-time indie, I was like working after hours on contract work or whatever, and instead of doing the things I needed to do to ship the game, I would just kind of explore whatever area I was interested in that night after work. And that led to some really cool things. Like, that led to me figuring out that the overworld was a cool idea, and it led to some of these toys that exist in the overworld already, like the swing set and the tetherball pole. Those were just kind of like on my way home from work. I don't know exactly that that's what happened, but this is what I guess is on the way home from work. I had this idea to do like a tetherball pole, and then I spent the night working on that instead of, you know, finishing the game or like finishing the latest arena I was working on or whatever. And so like leading up to when I went full-time indie, that was just kind of, I would just like play around and work on whatever felt cool that night, and that was cool, but it didn't get the game done. And so kind of once I went full-time, I was like, okay, I have some runway amount of money where I can work on this game until I run out of money, and that kind of, and I'm telling, you know, Nintendo, or I'm telling fans or whatever, that there's going to be this kind of release window, and if I want to hit that window, I need to like focus on getting the game done instead of doing whatever I want. And so I found that having a hard deadline and having expectations from others, and you know, and having the pressure of like, I'm gonna run out of money if I don't hit this deadline, which is the deadline that I've said is different from the deadline of money. Like, I have extra runway after after fall 2017, so I'm not gonna die if I can't ship on time. But I found that pressure and those release dates were like really useful for actually finishing the game and focusing on finishing the game. I don't want to show this board. There's a cork board behind the camera that is like has like months and like the things I need to get done in the month. And you know, there's a bunch of tasks and there's stuff for post launch and everything. And on the left side of the cork board, there's maybe like 20 pins that have gone away as I've completed tasks. And sometimes I'll add new tasks, but mostly I'm like grinding down the number of things I have left to do. And that only happened because I started thinking about, okay, what needs to get done before this game can get done, make a list, go down the list and don't do other things. And so that's my way of staying focused is, or one big way of staying focused is, instead of working kind of freewheeling like whatever I want to do that day, it's like, okay, no, I'm gonna like my target is to get the game done. Here are the things I need to do. Here's my plan to reach that goal. I've talked about triage on here before, but I guess I'll mention it again as when you make that big list of like things that need to get done before the game is done, not all of those things, probably, unless you're like really good at this, are things that are needed to get the game done. Some of those are like nice to haves, or this could be cut if the pressure's really on and your team doesn't want to like, and they shouldn't like, and your team doesn't want to work like 8-hour weeks, and they shouldn't. There are things that can be cut, and that's kind of the idea of triage, is like work on the things that are most important to whatever your goal is. If it's getting the game done, or if it's a prototype, you might triage towards like getting, like expressing the idea fully of your prototype or whatever. So that working towards a goal is really good there. I don't know why I guess this was related to staying focused, because this week I kind of was feeling burnt out. I had worked every day up until like Friday of this week. I had worked every single day, like not always like a super long day, but often like a very long day. And so I was starting to feel burnt out, and I won't get too much into it, but my bike broke last week, and so I haven't been able to exercise as much, and so I'm feeling like more especially burnt out as a result of that, like loss of dopamine from exercising every day to and from work. So this was like a prevalent topic this week. So I'm gonna talk about stuff you can do to fight burnout. One, like the most obvious one is, if you don't crunch or like work more than you should, this isn't gonna be an issue. So don't do that if you can help it. But if you are in a burnout situation, I guess I'll move my thing over here so you can read at your own pace. Exercise is really big for me. I didn't realize this until I started biking to my office every day, which is like a 20-minute ride or something. If I just like get that exercise every day, 20 minutes riding a bike each way to and from work, that like kind of pushes off any kind of like depressive tendencies I had, or like fights the urge I would get in the morning to just go back to sleep and like sleep for 3 more hours or whatever. So that's really huge for me. It's not the case for everybody probably, but that one's really big. In working on a game alone, something that I'm fortunate to be able to do is switch tasks, and that I kind of showed you that, like the polished distracting thing is like, oh man, this one task was really bumming me out and like taking a long time, and I felt like bogged down by it, so I wanted to switch tasks, but it was kind of like the main thing to do, so anything else I would be doing is like a distracting side thing. But if you can switch tasks, whether that be like if you're working on a new feature, if you're like stuck on a programming problem, or if you're stuck on like an art thing where you don't know how to make it look as good as you want, if you switch tasks to like do something else, or like maybe you're writing a story for the game, or like you're if you were stuck on the art, just switch to programming, or if you can do music, like switch to music or whatever. That's a super useful tool that multidisciplinary people have to like keep being efficient even if they're stuck on a specific problem. I do that a lot. I heard I don't know why it sounds so cliche, but I heard in a TED talk recently this idea of knowing when to procrastinate, and it's kind of related to the triage thing I was talking about earlier, where when you have a list, you like sort them by how important they are, and all, you know, that's the main thing. But or it's like, how important is this to the game? How important is this right now? Um, and this TED talk kind of suggested you can also like that's the thing they suggested, is how important is this to do right now? Can I put this off till later? And if you keep putting it off until later, if it gets put off until the end of the project, maybe it wasn't that important to begin with. And that's something I'm kind of learning now. Is there was one section of the overworld, and I've totally shown this on stream before, but the unlock hall, it was like a room where you go to check out the unlocks that you could get in the game, like new characters, new skins, new hats. And it was this super cool idea I had, where you'd like go open a book, and the book is like a 3D model that flies up to your face, and then you have like UI in the book that you can kind of like scan through a grid to see the different things you'll unlock, as like a silhouette with a question mark or whatever. And once you unlock it, there would be a description, etc. It's like this complex feature. But the more I would look at my to-do list of things to do, that one kept getting pushed back, but I kept kind of like inching towards working on it, because it was just like a cool idea and I was excited about it. But eventually I was like, you know what, this idea keeps getting pushed back to the end. Like, I don't need this. Like, this adds something to the game, but it doesn't, like, the core idea of the game isn't kind of served by this idea necessarily, or it's not served as much as other ideas would serve it, other mechanics and systems in the game would serve it. So I just said, okay, I'm not going to do this at launch. If I feel like that's missing from the game, or people are confused by like not knowing what they can get, then I'll add it back in. But it's that's the kind of thing, like I on that specific thing, I know when to procrastinate, because I kept thinking about it and it kept not being that important. The last one is take time off. I know I mentioned just don't crunch, like that's bad. But if you have to, sometimes you do need to just take a whole day off and like let your brain relax and think about other things and like breathe a little bit. Every time I do this, whether I'm crunching or not, if I just take a few days off, vacation or whatever, I always come back like super refreshed, and I've thought of a bunch of different ideas or a bunch of solutions to problems I was having before. And it's not even like I'm focused thinking about these things while I'm on vacation or like taking the day off. It's just like naturally, it's kind of like in the back of your brain, kind of like I don't know, you might be in a conversation and like something in the conversation triggers your brain to like think about that thing again, and then you suddenly like have a solution for it, and you didn't have to like devote any time to it necessarily. It's just like kind of calendar time rumbling in your brain. So I recommend that. So that's all kind of staying focused stuff. The other thing I want to talk about, the other idea I want to talk about is refining the design of your game or parts of your game by simplifying or cutting things. And this was inspired by a tweet that JW from Blambeer made that was like, I think it was like the best part of designing a game is when you realize you can like cut a big chunk of it or simplify a big chunk of it, and that makes the game better. I feel like a lot of designers I know, or even programmers, like know this feeling of like you've kind of over the course of prototyping a feature or adding the feature to your game, you kind of like make it really complex, and then you give it to a player and they're like, I can't comprehend this, like this is ridiculous, or this isn't fun, or this isn't interesting. And in that process, you always like have a bunch of solutions potentially. You think up a bunch of things while they're telling you their problem, and maybe you don't always have a bunch of solutions, maybe you have one or two, but often I found the best solutions for that in that kind of situation are when I remove half of the feature or something. And I want to give a kind of a concrete example of this, so that makes more sense. In the tutorial of Sausage, you go to this gym, Yeah, there's this gym. It's kind of a room designed to just have things to teach you the mechanics of the game. And I'll go through and explain like what about each decision a little bit. Yeah, so this is the tutorial gym. It's kind of this big room. It's a weird shape. But you start here, and when you, I guess I should kill my save data so you can actually see the tutorial. When you go in there, Scout talks to you and he tells you to come talk to him, and I'll, you know, show you what's up in the gym. And then you go through the tutorial. I'll just show you. I don't need to explain it that much. Okay. Okay, I'll show you the basics. So he says come over there, and you can see him, and you can find him. But to get over there, you have to jump. Like, if you don't know how to jump, you can't get to him. Maybe you could try to dash, but the, like, if you know how to dash but not jump, like, the gap's too big, so you have to learn how to jump. And the sign is, like, flashing in your face, whatever. So go over here. Nice, looks like you've got it. Stomp on that button over there to get the balls. See if you can kick into these targets. So now this part of the tutorial, there's a button, it creates a ball. If I hit it with my face, I cannot move it. The only way I can move it is to kick it. And then I can hit the target, and I gotta get both of them, so it's not a fluke that I hit it. If you fail, you know, it's totally fine. And that tutorial works. Like, it just like makes more sense to people. It forces them to do the thing that, you know, you're trying to teach them to do. Make sure they know the mechanics. Previously, let me back out of the tutorial just so we can look at that section again. Previously, there wasn't, come on. Previously, instead of like a button attached to a pad and then the ball just like appearing stuck on the pad, there was kind of this wall here had I think I probably still have the tube. Ball dispenser, spitter. Yeah, there's this tube. There's this tube, and the ball like spit a ball out of the tube, but the ball kind of like spit in some random direction sometimes. And then the ball could go anywhere, and you can still do this, but you could kick a bunch of balls and they would all be all over the place. But the ball wasn't locked to one place, and when you're teaching somebody a kick, you want it to be like really easy for them to line themselves up and like aim at the thing they're gonna try to kick. And if the ball's moving or if it's in a corner or something, it's just like it's way harder for them to do that goal that you're trying to teach them how to do. And I thought, oh, this will be dynamic. You know, it's a physics game. It'll be interesting. They'll have to like play around a little bit. And then I had a couple of people play test, and they were just like confused by it, and they got stuck on it, and they eventually they were like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I'm just gonna go like play with other stuff and like leave the gym. And I could force them to not do that. Like I could like block off the door to the other area. I could force them to stay in the gym until they do it. But it's just like, why don't I just make the thing that they're trying to do like easier and more like explicit and just obvious, you know? And so I simplified it by not having this weird ball dispenser, and I simplified it by not letting the ball go all over the place. And it just made it way better. And an example of this for the coding side of it, I'm not gonna explain how code works or anything. This is just to like refresh myself. Previously, when deciding how a ball reacts to your hits, the like number of inputs you had and the way those inputs were applied were a lot more complicated than they are now. Instead of having these 3 sliders here on ball physics to define how a ball behaves, I think I had like 6 of them, and each of them was less obvious than each of these 3. Previously, it was like when you hit a ball, there's like some it like applies the force from the physics hit or whatever, but it also adds an additional force on top of that, and then you also scale both of those forces together, but you also scale the added force separately. And this was just like a crazy, kind of weird group of group of inputs. Like, it's hard as a designer for me to like look at the inputs and be like, okay, this is how it's going to work, obviously. And so I'm kind of like being brief just to like avoid getting too in the weeds about this topic, but the idea is like you need to keep inputs as simple as possible, so that you can, when you look at them, you can like tweak them and like know exactly what's going to happen and know what to expect. But in the course of prototyping a feature or whatever, or a mechanic or whatever, you often will you'll when you start, maybe you'll code it up and you know like, okay, I'm gonna need this input and that input, and those are great, those are like fine inputs, and you add them, and then you at some point in prototyping from then on, you're like, oh, actually it would be cool if I could do this other thing, but that doesn't really play nice with the other inputs I already have, but I'll just add it on top, and like that, maybe that'll be the last thing I add and that'll be fine. And then you do that 3 more times, and then suddenly you've got 5 inputs when they don't, like, these inputs don't make sense in the context of each other. And you end up with like the ball situation I had, where I like would come to add a basketball or something, and I'd have these tweakables that I added specifically to tweak the soccer ball that could have been condensed into one variable or whatever. And then it became really hard for me to imagine like, oh, what numbers do I need to put here and here which will be combined in code in some weird unintuitive way so that I can make a basketball. And it was just like really hard. But then when I came back and I said, okay, I know I want to have a basketball, a volleyball, a soccer ball, a football, whatever, all these kind of sports balls. What are the things that make these up? What are the simplest inputs I can give to like do each of these? And then you can just do it. Like then you can just choose the 3 inputs instead of the many inputs. Is the point I'm trying to make. And if that doesn't make sense, the other example I wanted to bring up is like if you're writing a rough draft of a paper for school or a script or a game idea, whatever, the first pass is going to just be like wild, like ideas, and you're gonna overdo it. You're gonna write too much, and you're not gonna have like the core thing that you want. That's not gonna be the focus of it. It's just gonna kind of be all over the place. And when you read back over it, you're gonna, if it's like decently well written, even, you're gonna realize like, okay, this is like the thing I'm trying to talk about in the script. This is the story I'm trying to tell, or this is the game. This is the core game thing that's interesting to me. And then you're gonna refine it, and you're gonna with the script, you're gonna take out all the characters that don't matter and don't progress the plot and progress the story and progress the thing you're trying to talk about. With the game idea, you're gonna take out all the mechanics, all the systems, all the content that don't contribute to the like, depending on what kind of game you're making, either the like mechanics exploration you're trying to do, or the narrative storytelling thing that you're trying to do, or whatever other kind of game is. Like, you're going to take out anything that doesn't contribute towards the design goal that you're trying to achieve, and that's good, and that's going to simplify it and make it better, because there's not all this like extraneous garbage on top of your thing. Okay, that's all the stuff I wanted to talk about this week. I hope that's useful. And if there's any questions, I can answer those about the stuff I've talked about or about the game, whatever. I'll hang around for like 2 minutes, and otherwise I'm just gonna get off. I've been playing Benefati's new game, Getting Over It, with Benefati, and I'm like, I just want to get back to it. I'm very close to the end. So that's what I'm going to do after this stream. Okay, looks like there are no questions. I'm going to just take off. Thanks for checking this out. Bye.